first question. This year, among the movies we're showing, we have 3 post-apocalyptic movies. Mm-hmm. Your one, Crumbs, and Turbo Kid, we did show last night. It's like it became a big thing, big thing. Post-apocalyptic movies. Mm-hmm. What do you think about this? About the way it grows in cinema?
Well, first of all, my preferred term is post-event, okay. Because the apocalypse is the end of the world. Yet it's very much continuing whenever we see these existing. So there's been some sort of cataclysmic event, nuclear war, Holocaust, whatever, and there are the remains of the human race. The reset button has been pushed. The reason I think I find these stories interesting is because of what they reveal of individuals. When they're put under extreme pressure and they're put in circumstances where they have to do things they never would have when the clothing of society was removed. I think the attraction for audiences is a combination of things. We are very concerned about our future. Europe currently is facing a huge refugee crisis. There are tens of millions of people on the move worldwide as a result of war and famine. And there's an element we feel this is going to become true. And then there's another element is some people want it to become true. Their lives are so static, they're so nullified by consumerism. They desire the catharsis of collapse as something meaningful as compared to the nihilism of their life in the entrenched capitalist system.
Okay. When I saw the movie, I was very impressed by the writing and how precise you are on details. Mm-hmm. It's all about details. Can you tell us about this obsession on little things that makes your movie so true?
Well, I'm not entirely responsible for everything we see on screen. It's a collaboration between very talented heads of department and my cast, who often will redefine the scene when we're on the set. The first thing is, from a technical background, we've approached the film from wanting to make it as accurate as possible. So that involved research, that involved trying to convey process. And secondly, from an acting perspective, every time they do a scene, there's so little dialogue in the scene and everything is so filled with caution that what we've wanted to do is make sure every action they do feels true to their characters. And so the precision is very important, because if there's one false note, the whole scene will be rendered untrue. The details make up the whole. And without the details being true, the film has nothing to offer. It's just a pageant of fakery.
We were just talking about the actions of your characters, and what struck me is that there's no moral judgment at no point.
The film merely observes the actions the characters do, and it invites the audience to make decisions and react to what happens on screen. So rather than have someone explain why they've become so hardened and so deadened to human experience, we simply depict them in that state and invite the audience to question why they might have arrived at that point. And that's a method that we use across the film. For example, there's no music, because music is typically editorialization. It's guiding the audience's emotional response. And I'm also interested in how characters act when the eyes of God are removed. There's a scene where Martin is about to have sex with Milia for the first time, and Martin's the actor's name, the character's the survivalist, and he pulls up the shutters to the cabin. And our reason on set was they might have other partners who might shoot him through the window or break in. But the way I read that scene when I see it now is he doesn't want anyone, he doesn't want the sense that anyone can see what he's about to do. He's so ashamed of it. And it's very interesting how people behave when they're completely unobserved. Particularly the women. When the women are alone and we see them alone, it's quite, it's kind of a big shock when we do, and they're completely different. I find that very, very interesting. One of my favourite scenes is when Catherine and Millie are debating whether or not to save his life outside, smoking a cigarette, and she's a completely different person. She's not pretending to be anyone, and she's next to a woman who's known her entire life, her daughter's life in that case, and I love how intimate that feels, because we're seeing something that's unvarnished by someone modulating the way they're acting for someone else's expectations or to manipulate them.
And yeah, it's very interesting. And about the lack of music, about the fact that you don't use music, you never were frustrated when you did edit the movie?
No, I think many people were in the editing process. Not me and my editor. We knew that the sound design would play a huge amount, and we knew that once the sound design was put in, the film would really work. What's important to say about the film is almost all the sound in the film is replaced. Okay. Almost nothing was recorded on location. It's all been created later, and that's through very elaborate Foley, atmosphere tracks, original sound effects design. When he comes into the cabin and bolts it and sets down the lantern, that's all in the studio. And the sound has been recorded completely differently later. And that was like a musical score, raising, lowering it, taking it around. It was a challenge in that we had to maintain tension and pace and guide the audience. We had one less tool to do it, which forced us to make everything else work better. The key reason I didn't want music was I wanted the audience to be more involved. I wanted them to have to work harder the whole time. And the more involved the audience is, the more intense the experience.
This week we had Clément Cogitor for The Wacom Front. I don't know if you've seen it. And he was just telling me that to him, sound editing was the most boring part, making a movie. Do you feel the same? Or?
On the contrary, it's my favourite part of the process. I would say when it's done well, because you can completely. There's no budget with sound in the sense that you can create the most incredible Hollywood sounds possible, and you can completely change the nature of the picture simply through sound. The most important element of my films, in terms of them successfully being played back to an audience, is that the film is played loud enough, because there's a very precise sound level for the audience to have the best experience. And I've grown increasingly aware of the real world techniques I need to deploy to make sure the audience hears the film the way I want. Okay. The film is almost entirely mixed in mono. Most films are in 5:1, so you've got your center channel, you've got your left and your right, and you've got your rears and the sub. 100 minutes of this film is entirely out of the center channel alone, and no other speakers, which makes it very intense. But also mono, I think, sounds fantastic, because stereo sounds a little fake, because that's not a real sound image, whereas mono is a single speaker, and the actual reverberations of the room are what make it wider. I think it's very, very interesting, and it sounds great in the worst cinema. In the best cinema or the worst cinema, it still sounds great. Another thing I've learned is that you need to mix your film very loudly, very, very loudly, because it will always be played back very quietly in cinemas by projectionists. Projection is a dying art, and what they do is they stick on very, very loud trailers, and they just turn the sound down for them, but they never turn them up again for the movie. So you've got to find a way of getting your movie heard at the right volume. But it's a key part of the process. It's often overlooked. You can bring a film up to a different level with good sound design that you can't in other ways. This was particularly tricky, but I had a fantastic sound editor and sound mixer in the form of Jamie Roden at Goldcrest, who did a really extraordinary job with his team. Superb Foley artists, some great editors assisting him. Mike Suarez in New York was fantastic as well. And he really put his heart and soul into it. I'm tremendously proud of his work. If I was to say my favourite thing about the film, would actually be the sound. And I actually still like seeing the film to hear it, because I don't have a cinema at home. I can only hear it in the cinema. So that's why I like hearing it.
Okay, did you write the movie alone?
Yes.
Yes, and you started as a writer.
I've always been a director, and I had to learn how to write in order to have material to direct. But the script existed before the film, and I gained a reputation as a writer, and I was able to get some writing commissions. But I was a director. You know, I've only taken one paid job on a script where I'm not the director.
Okay, because Corinne told me yesterday that he read the script and he presented you as a writer back then. So I thought you were a writer, and as when we talk together, you really sound like a director with complete vision. So
well, I think that was probably my agents thought there was money to be made if I was presented as a writer, and there was. But I love working with writers. I have written one short film for a friend of mine called Michael Lennox recently, which was a prequel to The Survivalist, and it was about the survivalist when he was a child, and he's been raised by his mad dad, him and his brother getting messed up by this kind of abusive regime of survivalist training. His father wants to teach him because he sees what's coming, and Michael directed that, and it's a great film. And I'm happy saying it's great because I didn't direct it. So I'm like, God, that's, you know, because this, you know, I like the script, but he got the script into a completely different direction, did an amazing job. Okay. And he's just done his first feature film, which is really good. It's called A Patch of Fog. And if people get a chance to see it in a while, it's worth a watch.
And will you ever show this short film with The Survivalist in the same screening room for?
We've done it. I've done it before, but it's intended to be released online.
Okay.
So that people get to see the world and the characters of the film, and they're introduced to it that way.
Okay.